everybody. I'm Mike Brune. I used to do Becky's bidding at Rainforest Action Network. And so there's one thing about Becky that you might not know. So one thing that hasn't shown up in all of the Facebook tributes and the articles that we've seen, one thing that isn't on that massive Rand Tumblr of tributes, and that's that as good of a public speaker that Becky was, she was an awesome audience member. She was the best. In fact, this is a true story. She was so good. Becky would, Becky and I worked together for a few years, and we used to tell some of the same stories again and again and again. And Becky would laugh every time, the same jokes every time. It's true. It was so good. She was so good at that I would always ask her to sit in the front row. I would always say, hey, I want to go, can you just go sit up front? Because she would laugh at every joke, she would cry, she would cheer. And so, thanks for filling in. So I want to tell two stories about Becky. The first has to do with the person who's up there, the visionary, transcendent, inspirational leader that many of you grew to know really closely, and all of us grew to love. And then the other one is a different side of Becky that also didn't show up on Facebook or in those articles. So the first story actually touches on what Elise was referring to. It's an event at the State Department in 2012, late last year. And so what happened is the State Department was holding this symposium on tropical deforestation in Southeast Asia. And Becky knew going into that this was a huge chance because there were a number of key decision makers, both within the administration and then a lot of corporate executives who were making decisions that had the fate of the rainforest in their hands. And one of Becky's self-given assignments for that symposium was to go talk to the CEO of General Mills. And she went up, the CEO of General Mills personally makes decisions that affect hundreds of thousands of acres of rainforests, the lives of entire communities, the human rights of people all around the world. And they had been refusing to act in good faith and refusing to do what's right. And so it was Becky's job to go up and talk truth to this person. So she went up and she introduced herself. Hi, I'm Becky Tarbotton. I'm the executive director of Rainforest Action Network. And she got in about another sentence or two. And the guy wearing his $10,000 suit shut her down, turned her off, and looked away. And so over the course of a dinner and then a long conversation, Becky talked passionately about who Rainforest Action Network was, what they do, why they do it, the success that they have had with some companies in convincing them to make dramatic changes in their operations, and the impact that had on people's lives all around the world. But the whole time, Becky was thinking to herself, I can't let this go. I can't let this one person shut me down. Too much is riding on it. And so she walked back up to him, and she said, I introduced myself to you before, but I think I really need to tell you who I am. And they hit it off. Elise talked a little bit about how difficult it is being a woman in the environmental movement. Thanks for the tissues. It's not easy for anyone to walk up to a CEO and confront them. That in itself takes guts. It's harder still to walk up to a CEO who could be making decisions to lift up everybody, could be making decisions to strengthen human rights and protect forests, and is doing the exact opposite. And walk up to that person and not kick their fucking ass. It takes restraint, but it takes grace to do that. But it takes an exquisite person who, after you make that overture and you get shut down and you're discarded, to come back and to bring your whole self to the conversation and to not let go until you break through. And Becky never let go. She knew instinctively to bring her whole humanity to her job and to her life. I only had a couple years to work with Becky, but when I would go into a meeting with her and other CEOs, or I'd see Jennifer Krill and Becky go into a meeting together, sometimes all three of us would go, we were badass. We were badass. We knew that we would go in and we would say, here's what has to happen. Here's the timeline that it has to happen on. Here's why you have to make these changes. But the key part, a lot of folks can do that. The key part is that Becky helped to show us how to do that as just regular boys and girls, men and women, regular human beings. And we knew that with her leadership, that even though we were challenging these CEOs, even though we were threatening these companies, we knew that they actually agreed with us, and that their professions might not allow them to move forward, but in their hearts they wanted to. And the genius of Becky is that she enabled people to do that. The other story about Becky is that she was really goofy. And, you know, nobody talks about this so much. But, like, really, I mean, this is a woman who, I didn't see this in the New York Times piece, but, you know, she once declared to me, without any embarrassment, her deep, undying devotion to Phil Collins. It's true. It's true. I don't know if Paul's here from Amazon Watch. Right, yeah. That one's for you. So here's my second story. So it was a couple years ago at Revel, and I'm having a conversation with Michael Kieschnick from Credo. Michael, I don't know if you're here tonight. If you're not, I'll exaggerate a little bit. So there we were. And so Michael and I were talking about basketball, and Michael has this game that he plays every now and then. And Becky came up, and she listens in, and she realizes what we're talking about. She starts trash talking about what an awesome basketball player she is, and she's standing up really tall, and she's, you know, insulting Michael, and she's saying, you know, Michael says, well, we'll have to play. It'd be great to have you join us. And so Becky says, awesome, let's do it, you know, anytime. And so Michael proceeded. The games were rather rare, so he invited her to a game. And she just couldn't make it that time. So a couple months later, she got invited to another game. Couldn't do it. She couldn't make it. Third time, Becky and I had had lunch the day before, and I told her that I was about to be going on a trip to DC. I was going to be gone for a week. And then that afternoon, Michael sent another email and said, hey, you know, a couple days from now, it'd be great to come. And so Becky, being the smart, strategic person that she is, said, I'll tell you what, I'll come if Brune can play, knowing I was going to be out of town. But my plans got changed. So, because I also like a good time, I knew about Becky's skills. I said, I can play. Let's do it. It'd be great. And Becky just sent me an email with 5 exclamation points. I actually didn't know what her skills were, but I could tell she was trash talking. So she just sent me a reply saying 5 exclamation points. So I thought, oh, well, maybe, seems pretty enthusiastic. And so she called me up late that afternoon, and I said, hey, Beck, what's up? She says, I don't know how to play. I don't know how to play. And so I'm told that there was a late night strategy session with maybe an offshoot of the Adventures Club, the Misadventures Club, and then deep consultation with Mateo. And the games are early in the morning, so I pick up Becky, and she begins with a confession. And on the ride to the game, we started developing all these strategies. And so her strategy was to just run fast, and she wanted terms, so she could say, hit the post, hit the post. And then just like lots of praise, and she would just, her goal was to hardly touch the ball at all. So as soon as someone would pass it to her, she would just pass it right back to them and then run. And Gene Karpinski is here somewhere, and he was there for that game as well. And so she made it through, had a great time, and the thing that I got from Becky with that is really that she had no fear. She had no fear. She was willing to try anything. Brianna this morning talked about one of her lessons from Becky was say yes to everything. Even when you suck at basketball, say yes to everything. When you don't know what you're doing, when you're fearful, when you get put in a situation that you don't know how you're going to handle it, say yes to everything. So I've been, like everybody, thinking a lot and trying to come to grips with what this means and trying to imagine a world without Becky. And Becky's instinct wasn't even an instinct. Her very essence was to bring her whole self to everything. I think a lot about Becky at the State Department. I think about Becky on the basketball court. In her work life, she knew at a gut level that it's not just going to take smart campaigns for us to prevail. It's not going to take confrontation only or strategic antagonism to prevail when love does a better job. And Becky did all of that. She was fearless, she was fun, she was goofy as hell, she was smart, she was tough. I miss her so much.